Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a very special Marvel movie talk on the Blackcast Network, where we are talking about a Marvel movie, the latest one. And it wouldn't be one of our Marvel reaction shows without immediately in the chat, Daniel Drew patiently waiting. Woohoo! Reaction special. Good to be back. Absolutely. As always, I am Christian Blatt, joined by Mr. Jeff Williams Jr. Jeff, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back. I don't get to do this as often anymore because of my job, but I'm glad to be talking Marvel. I'm glad to be talking something that I can talk in Marvel. But yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm glad to talk about something that was a great movie. Don't want to get too much into it, but yeah, I'm just
Well,
excited.
yeah, we're about to get all the way into it, and you and I went and saw it last week. One of those press screenings that I like to pound my chest about, and it just kept not working out for you to be able to go. You came and saw Eternals, which is a movie that I didn't really dislike, but considering the way that it was received, I felt like I owed you a do over. After Eternals, I didn't want Eternals to be the only one. So when Guardians 3 came up, I was glad that you were able to come and check it out. Let's sort of reset the Guardians to begin with. How were your feelings about the first two Guardian movies? And you can't discount their numerous appearances in Avengers movies, Thor: Love and Thunder, and of course the Christmas special. So where were you at with the Guardians before sitting down to watch Guardians Volume 3?
So I thought the first Guardians was one of the better movies in the MCU. I thought it was really fun. I thought it was, I believe at the time, one of the first like in the galaxy movies, like where we're like non on Earth and everything. So it was really cool, and it threw me off that we were listening to a rocket talk, we were watching a tree talk and everything, but like we grew to love those characters so quickly, and it shows you the greatness that is James Gunn. Cut to Guardians 2. I thought it was still good. I thought it was a good volume two. I didn't think it was as good as one, but when we get to three, but let me step back real quick. After volume two, I still love the characters. I just didn't think volume two was just strong. I love the characters in all the different Avengers movies, and then getting to three, I thought three was better than two. I don't. It was probably it was probably my favorite out of the trilogy, but it made the trilogy great and worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree with basically everything you said. I mean, the first Guardians was really an unknown. You knew it was going to be this spacefaring story, and the characters that comic book fans knew as the Guardians of the Galaxy, unless they were reading sort of the reset on the Guardians that was done basically because of the movie. They were completely different characters. It's actually Sylvester Stallone's character, Yondu, and that group. That's who I thought of as the Guardians of the Galaxy. They had a series in the early '90s, and it was not any of these. Nebula sort of showed up separately, not looking anything like she does in the movies as an Avengers villain. So getting these characters, excuse me, the one I knew the best was Rocket Raccoon. And in the movies, he doesn't. You can't call him a raccoon. I mean, we'll get to that. But so yeah, it was such an unknown thing. And you're right. I mean, it was like the Avengers. It dealt with a threat from space and from beyond, and this was really the first time that we had sort of spacefaring space opera added into the MCU. And I preferred the first one to the second one. I prefer this one to the second one. I know people who love the second one, and I'm like, well, I just wish that was me, but it isn't. But whenever they'd show up in an Avengers movie, it's like they wouldn't have that much time, but they'd get some good lines in. And in since Guardians 2, you really, at least me personally, I've had an affinity for Mantis. She has like one line in Endgame, and it's the idea that Peter and Thor should fight with knives. And I'm like, yeah, she's great. She really got to shine in the Christmas special and get to see a lot of her here. But also someone who is a threat from the great beyond, also joining us, the great David Brody. Hello, sir. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me in the room. I was eavesdropping,
Yeah.
and I was enjoying the podcast. I'm like, oh, I could just sit back and enjoy this.
Yeah, it was very Dickensian. You know, you were there with your street pauper friends, kind of looking in the window of the restaurant, and I was going to have you shoot away, but then I'm like, no, you know what? We'll let him in. We had just started talking, David, about kind of where we were with the Guardians and how much we've, enjoyed their story from the first film through the Avengers films. So sitting down to watch the third film, I'll ask you the same question I asked Jeff. What were your thoughts as you were about to sit down and watch this movie?
Well, I was excited for it, but I was trying to remember what happened in Guardians 2. It was so long ago. I felt like the way Mandalorian went on Book of Boba Fett and did a whole story there. And then when Mandalorian 3 started, you didn't know what was going on unless you watched Boba Fett.
Sure,
I had to try to remember everything they did in the Avengers movies and the Christmas special and Thor to kind of bring me back. I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't he have these conversations with Gamora? I feel like he's already tried with her. So I thought that it would progress past that, but it seemed to go back and start again with wrong Gamora and have to reset that for those that didn't follow along with all the other movies. But I expected a lot of death based on a lot of YouTubers and a lot of reviews, a lot of crying and reviewers crying. My daughter sent me a picture. She had gone to see it yesterday morning, and it was just mascara running down her face. And she said, because she's up in college, and she said, oh, it's the greatest Marvel movie ever. And she was just tearing up. And I was like, oh my God, who died? Nobody. We're spoiling it, right? Nobody died.
Yeah, so that's what I was about to say. Is we're in the area where we're going to start spoiling it. We wanted to have a couple of moments, maybe where we weren't delving so far into that, but this is a spoiler-filled zone at this point. I'll put an admonition, excuse me, on the screen, but yeah, we are definitely talking about all of it here. So I even put it up on the screen. Look at that, everyone. So yeah, so now we can kind of talk about it. And yes, it's some just wonderfully selective editing for the trailer for this, because there is a lot of characters crying. There is impending doom. There is tragedy that seems afoot. And that is kind of the biggest surprise, is where we end up at the end of it. And again, for anybody hopping in right now, we are going to talk about all the spoilers for Guardians Volume 3. So with the spoiler curtain lifted, what were you specifically going to say, David?
Well, just like you said about the trailer, there's a scene where they're carrying Star-Lord. There's a scene where Gamora's carrying Rocket. There's a scene where Star-Lord is screaming, ah, like you saw somebody die. And then there's a scene where they're helping Drax because he's been shot in the chest. They certainly made it look like it's the end. And then James Gunn's doing interviews saying, I don't kill characters for no reason. If I kill them, it's for a good reason. It's to move the story along. I hate doing it. And I'm thinking, all right, he already killed Gamora, right? He already killed Groot. So he's got no problem killing people. Now Groot's back, sort of. It's not the same Groot. Gamora's back. It's not the same Gamora. So they could technically kill anyone and just, multiverse them back. But nobody died. I thought Star-Lord's head was going to explode. Like when he started puffing up, I said, okay, he's going to explode. Then you'll know he's dead and he can't come back. But he didn't explode. And he didn't die. So, I mean, I'm relieved, but,
No, and I think it's kind of not what I expected, because you just kind of had a feeling of certain actors, having possibly gotten to be too expensive. One of the things I talked to Jeff about when we saw it was that this idea that, Dave Bautista has been pretty upfront about how he doesn't want to play Drax anymore. So it just seemed to be the most logical thing is that he would die. And there were moments where he certainly could have. There were moments where pretty much everyone could have died. in all honesty. So I don't know. I thought that was really surprising. So Jeff, your thoughts on that we didn't get the kind of loss that I think we were prepared for this movie.
Yeah, I was just like everybody said, I was going in expecting some type of death, if not multiple deaths. And when I was watching it, I wouldn't say I was disappointed, but when I was like, okay, he lived again, and like they all made it through, and every part was believable, but I don't know if I would have. I'm kind of indifferent about it. I can see if people are upset that there weren't deaths, but I definitely came in thinking that there were. But every moment I still thought there were still big stakes. I still thought there were big moments. There were still big deaths. I mean, there were still big events, but no one died. So I mean, I'm not really upset about it. I guess that's where I'm at. One thing I did want to say, one of my friends that has not seen it, he asked me, and just how other people are thinking about it. He's like, "How many people died?" And he was talking about, did Rocket die? And I was like, because I guess he told me this in the comics when Rocket goes to attack the I was gonna call him Grand Superior. What is his name?
The High Evolutionary.
High Evolutionary. I was way off. The High Evolutionary. When in the comics he goes and attacks the High Evolutionary, he actually dies in that attack. So I was just smiling and just not saying anything because I didn't want to ruin it. And when he said how many people died, I said I'm not telling you anything because obviously I can't say 0 because that's an obvious number.
Yeah, no, and it's also like you can be like, well, look, there are a lot of creatures that die in this film. I'm just not going to tell you how many of them are Guardians of the Galaxy, But yeah, it really is fairly surprising. Our pal Daniel Drew in the chat, I actually thought Warlock was going to kill Drax in that first fight. I wouldn't have minded to make him seem like a big threat, taking out their muscle team member. Yeah, and that would have been at the very beginning of the movie, and that is one of the things I was wondering. Considering how powerful Adam Warlock is in the comics, I'm surprised actually that he didn't kill anybody. But it's one of those things where, from a storytelling standpoint, you would have respected it. You would have felt all the things, especially characters whose deaths are set up and you feel like are unfolding on screen, and then you kind of pull back at the last minute. And you have to wonder, was James Gunn kind of told, you can't actually kill anybody because I know you're done? This is Kevin Feige speaking, obviously. But just because you don't want to make a Guardians Volume 4 doesn't mean I don't want to. And, we'll talk about the end credit scene. They clearly have more plans. Did you get that feeling after you saw it, David, that maybe there are some higher ups that are like, we're keeping the brand going, we're keeping the band going, even if we're losing our front man in the way of James Gunn?
Oh, I turned to my wife after the movie and I said, obviously he was told he can't kill anybody.
Yeah.
Because you could have easily killed Drax. The guy's not coming back. Gamora said she's not coming back. Now they could maybe bribe her into coming back, but Drax was pretty forceful. He doesn't want to do those kind of movies anymore.
Yeah.
So kill him, right? But they didn't. I don't know if I would have wanted him. In response to the guy who just chimed in, I wouldn't have killed him that early in the movie. I think he showed he was powerful by besting Drax, that he didn't need to kill him. Plus, if you know anything about Adam Warlock, he's powerful.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But the fact that he was his egg timer went off too early and he wasn't fully cooked, maybe kept him from being a little more potent. But
yeah, I almost feel like that story point is for people who expect him to be as powerful as he is in the comics. And in terms of Peter Quill's seeming demise, Dominicus Saxon points out, good thing Peter's only half human. Otherwise, he would have been a goner. Yeah, that's a good reason to think about something that might have saved him. The simple fact that, his dad's a planet, or was a planet when he was still around. So yeah. And it was, I saw it for the second time this morning. I went with my wife who hadn't seen it when Jeff and I saw it last week. And I knew everything that was coming. And I knew that nobody dies. None of our Guardians die. But that doesn't make, at least for me, Rocket, seeing Lila, and some of the, that one in particular, you're just like, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, come fly with us. And then, and then there's that it's a beautiful scene. and then has to, well, actually, but not yet. You can't go just yet. And I mean, Peter has this moment where it's so tragic if he dies because he went back to get his stupid Zune. That would have been very on brand for that character. That it's like, oh yeah, he if he hadn't taken that extra split second, he would have had enough time to jump across. And then he even comes up with like an ingenious way to get himself to the other side, and then he hits some space junk, which Jeff, that's the worst thing when you have you engineer some kind of logic and physics defying rescue for yourself, and then space junk gets in the way, right, Jeff? Don't you hate when that happens?
It's the worst. It happens almost every Tuesday night, but I'm glad it's Friday. No, for Peter Quill, I was kind of surprised, especially with the last post credit scene saying that he was coming back.
Yeah.
Out of anybody, I mean, other than Drax, I thought he was gone. I thought his head was gonna explode. I thought that would be a better end to his story than saying he's gonna return. I kind of wish that was Adam Warlock's sign. Adam Warlock will return so he can kind of get a better not a redemption story, but just a more developed story. Because we know everything about Peter Quill. What more do we need in that sense? Or what story is he really going to lead?
Oh, well, it's obvious he's going to get an iPod in the next movie.
Yeah.
Right? With music from 2010. He's got to experience all the new stuff. We have to watch him with an iPhone. Or an Android, preferably, but
yeah, yeah, I know, and it's I don't know, and like a lot of times these feelings, these expectations are shaped by the real world, and Chris Pratt has certainly come a long way from when he did the first Guardians in terms of what he can expect to be paid for his work, and I think that it would have been natural for him. To go back to Earth, and even if he wasn't dead, just go back to Earth. But you don't need to. I think that's why you have to tell us that he's coming back, because we're like, really? I did not see that coming. I did not expect that. So, I'm not disappointed because I like all these characters. I'm just surprised. I think that the trailer just made it all seem so emotional, the way people were talking about this movie. And like I said, I found it to be very emotional myself. Just a lot of the things, some of the interactions, the expectations, even knowing that no one died, like I said, especially like Rocket's scene, I thought was really well done. So I think that it'll be very interesting, and we'll kind of talk about that in the end of this part of the conversation about what we actually think is going to be next. But to something that Jeff touched on, I think I'm not hearing this because the movie has only really been out as we're talking right now. It's only come out yesterday, but I do wonder if people are going to feel like Adam Warlock, they didn't do enough with him, and it's the expectation of like, well, what is next for him? He is going to be someone that can compete with the upcoming big bad that we know will be Kang. We're not 100% sure on who's going to be playing Kang, but we do know that Kang will be our villain, and he's sort of that level of character. And I think having him not be as powered as he ought to be, knowing him from the comics, and the fact that they really played on the fact that he was a little slow. I thought that those interactions with Nathan Fillion's character, both of them, were actually pretty funny. Were you disappointed, David? I'll ask you about the portrayal of Adam Warlock, or did you feel like they kind of tempered it enough by saying, like you said earlier, that they pulled him out of the oven a little early?
Well, I thought it was enough. I thought there was 8 Guardians, and I wanted to focus on the Guardians. I think he played enough of a role as the bad guy when he needed him to be a bad guy, and then he was a hero at the end. He got his arc. He could have done a lot more. I'd like to see him with longer hair and a red and yellow outfit, Jim Starlin style. But it was enough for me as far as seeing him. Yes, I think he should be on the Ms. Marvel or Captain Marvel level and fighting the big bads. And if he's going to be a Guardian, I'm sure the Guardian's going to get called up to fight Kang at some point. So maybe we'll see him all out, in his longer hair by the time we see him again, when he has time for it to grow. No, I think I saw enough of him, to be honest, just enough. I'm not
Yeah.
disappointed.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that they at least addressed it. They didn't. Sometimes it's that simple. Just let us know you thought about something that we might have as a question about why people are behaving that way. So obviously, Jeff, I don't know that Adam Warlock would have been somebody you're familiar with. Did you found him to be an interesting enough character, though, that you're like, okay, well, what's next for him? Let's see more. I mean, the way that the movie ends, he is a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So he's out there, getting into all kinds of, mischief, one would assume. So what did you think of the character getting to meet him for the first time?
I think he's funny and likable enough because because we see that he's like half baked in the sense that he's still young, he's still naive, he's still relatable in that sense, but he's ultra strong. So my sense is like I'm excited to see what's next for him. Once he starts to realize what he can do, who the big players are in the world, how can he help the Avengers? I hope they don't do something in the same vein what they do with Captain Marvel, where they show us someone that's super strong and then he disappears for a while, because Captain Marvel just came at the end of Avengers Endgame rather than being a part of the actual fight. So I want to see more of him. I want him to be more developed, even if it's more of the naive version. I want to see him more developed in the story-wise with the rest of the characters in the MCU, not just the Guardians, and this new group Guardians too, because I feel like we need him, not the whole ragtag crew, when we're already going to be talking about other MCU characters.
Yeah, and in the chat earlier, our friend Daniel Drew mentioned that he went to something that I was interested in, but I did not have the time to devote to. He went to one of those showings where they did the marathon of all 3 Guardians movies, and I wanted to show something that he posted. I believe this is something that's available at AMC theaters, but he got this Rocket Raccoon popcorn tin, which is very, very handsome, I would say. I showed it to my wife and I was like, don't worry, I'm not going to try and buy it because, we have enough of these sort of things. But good for you, Daniel. It's pretty amazing, in all honesty. And, great choice in character to put with it, obviously, Rocket himself. Let's kind of go through some of the characters that we get along the way. I think that we should certainly talk about the Guardians themselves. And, when you popped in, David, I was in the middle of talking about, how quickly Mantis has really kind of grown on myself, but just in general, because we give her more screen time. And, she's this great foil for Drax, but she's this big hearted, but also very funny character. Very quick to, yell at someone, but, all in a well-meaning way. What did you think about really expanding Mantis in this film, which I think started in earnest in the Christmas special?
Well, yes, absolutely. Before I answer that, can you see this? I don't know if that's clear enough. Can you see that?
There's a little bit of a glare on it, but
let me see if I can get closer. That is the $30 Groot popcorn that I bought last night because my daughter has to have everything. Can you see that? It's brown.
I see it now.
It's not showing up, but it's brown. It's light brown. It's like a tan color. The light is blurring it, but that's
cool.
Yeah, so that was $30. Cool. So thank you.
I feel like the Rocket tin was probably also $30. So
I feel like I'd rather have the Rocket tin and not Rocket tin, but Rocket tin.
The Rocket tin, yeah.
Yeah. So that was Cinemark. I don't know where the Rocket tin came from, but if my daughter finds out about that, another $30 out of my pocket. I love Mantis. I think making her Star-Lord's sister, giving her a persona, not just the tag along. Definitely the Christmas special set her up. Definitely gave her more of a character, compassion, sometimes the voice of reason. They made her Cyrano de Bergerac in the movie where she was given Drax lines. I think this was a good movie to give everyone more of a role. I'm sure we'll talk about what they did with Drax's character. And, they gave everybody a time to shine. And I definitely think that Mantis has been stepping up in the last couple of things that the Guardians have been in to the point where maybe she can be in something else. She's going off to explore. So does she get a Disney show? Does she show up in somebody else's show? Who knows? Maybe she shows up in the Marvels and we don't know it yet. So
yeah, I think that that's the interesting thing about the way her story ends, is because I don't see that character anchoring her own movie, but certainly a Disney show, possibly a Disney special, Disney movie, and Disney. We're talking about Disney Plus, but also ending up with other characters and obviously spacefaring stories like the Marvels. But Jeff, I want to give you a moment to speak a little bit about Mantis as well, and. Always good to give credit to Pom Klementieff, who is the actress who portrays Mantis for us.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what you guys were saying. I thought at the beginning her role was very similar to Drax and just very naive, say a couple funny lines, but she just blended in. With the evolution of the holiday episode and this movie in particular, not really two. I can't really remember Volume 2 that much. I didn't think it was amazing, but either way, with those two volumes right here, with the holiday and Volume 3, I think we really got to see a lot of growth. You got to see her kind of come into her own, like you guys mentioned. There's opportunities for her to go into other films, and I really enjoyed it. I like her standing up for herself, because it kind of moved. It made her stand out in a movie that was already packed with 8 people in the Guardians, plus a plethora of other characters and animals and all the other things. What she did in those moments really stood out. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that you had so many characters to begin with, really. I mean, we cared a lot about these characters, but they were able to really wrap her in a good way. And I think Kraglin has sort of limited time, but he makes it count. Sort of, the way that James Gunn had figured out a great way to have Mantis and Drax play off each other. Kraglin and Cosmo are a great pair because, either one of them on their own, especially Cosmo being a dog, there's less to figure out what to do with them. And then when you put them together, and just sort of the runner through the movie that she just, like a dog would want you to take back calling her a bad dog, I thought was great. And, he gets a moment to shine. So he has a redemption arc as well. Kraglin I'm talking about, and he redeems himself with Cosmo as well. So yeah, let's talk. We've alluded to it before. We talked about Drax, and sort of it ties directly into Mantis, sort of just this realization, this revelation to him when they're just talking about him in front of him. It's like, we know he's stupid, and he just looks and he's like, you think I'm stupid? And it's very smart, because Mantis is like, forget. And she's like, yeah, you know what, that was too much. But the idea that he's stupid, but he loves us. And there's different kinds of stupid. He's got no book smarts, and then yet I thought it's a great moment, Jeff, that he speaks that language that all those children spoke.
Chop chop.
And it's such a great response to Nebula, where it's like, why didn't you tell us? He's like, why didn't you ask? I was like, well, because we think you're stupid. But give us your thoughts on Drax in this movie, who does not die, but there's a couple of times, especially when they're trying to get the information on Rocket, the code that they're trying to get, when he gets shot in the front and then shot again in the back. Those are 2 times where you're like, well, he looks like he could be gone, but they're like, nah, he's okay. So give us your thoughts on Drax, Jeff.
Yeah, I love Drax. I'm biased because Batista was around in my heyday of WWE. So that's when I heard that Drax was going to be part of the MCU. It was probably one of the biggest days for me. And seeing how he just evolved in this role, even by still playing the dumb friend, the naive big dummy in the role. He still grew in almost he still grew in almost every episode and every volume. And with this one, you got to see him kind of take control. Like, I know what you guys are saying. And then even more so, where he was just hiding his talents, because he doesn't need to boast himself up. He doesn't need to tell everybody what he knows. He can be a hero when he needs to be. And also, he knows a lot more than what he's telling. So that opens his story up to a lot more. And just like Nebula, just like all the different Guardians, you can kind of see them jumping into another movie, getting their own Disney Plus show, whatever it may be, because the story doesn't end for them. Although Batista says he wants to be a more serious actor and not show his chest every episode, every volume. So we might not see Drax unless he's in a t-shirt.
Yeah, and I mean, Dwayne Johnson could maybe take a page from Bautista at some point and be like, you know what, it's okay, you can wear a shirt once in a while. It wouldn't be the end of the world. David, similar thoughts on Drax. I'm kind of interested in your take on him in this movie, and what we're assuming, even though he doesn't die, that we're assuming this is the last time we're going to see him.
Well, you still had classic Drax. You still had knocking down the door, punching people. We're going to kill someone. When he's like, we'll kill a bunch of people. Okay, we'll just kill one guy nobody likes. Like, he was still funny, but he also spoke that language, and he danced, and he was a father figure, and he tried to emote to Star-Lord, and the analogies and metaphors thing was hilarious. Yeah, he's stupid, but he has a heart. He kept messing up. He left the ship. He wasn't supposed to leave the ship. So there was still classic Drax, but they didn't, in other words, they didn't make him soft. They didn't just suddenly make him a mushy guy who didn't want to hurt anybody, right? Nobody wants to see that. We want to see you hurt people, but we also want to see the other side of you. So I like the balance that they gave him. I thought it was a good mix of the behind the scene, the real Drax, right? But also old school Drax who wants to just, he's not the Incredible Hulk, right? He's not going to just like, it's Hulk smash. He's funny too, but he was also sensitive. And I think his arc where he gets to take care of the kids, he'll probably adopt a couple of them. I liked that a lot. I thought that was a good way for him to go out.
Yeah, no, I definitely sort of like the approach. And I thought the interaction with he and Peter is kind of a very strong character moment because of the fact that, as you eloquently referred to, Mantis, plays Cyrano de Bergerac with him and gives him all this great stuff to say. And Peter's like, yeah, I think people underestimate Drax, but he's not capable of this level of thought and comparison and all that. So, that's why there's the nice moment where he sees Mantis. He's like, oh, okay, I get it. But he's just like, it's easy to summarize it and say, yeah, Drax is stupid. But that's why, to me, it was like more of like a book smart thing that maybe he doesn't have. And he's very literal. And that's why the character is so funny from the first time we meet him in the first one. And I think that the bringing back this notion, that when we meet him, he's this like, grieving father, and sort of the parental nature of him. And yes, as we said, and as our pal Ivan Soto says, it is nice that he finally comes around and does dance in the film, because early in the movie, he does point out that dancing is for idiots, which is something that I may have felt a few times in my life, but we don't need to dwell on that. And I mean, I think that his arc is very well done, and were we not to see him again, I think they left it in a very satisfying place. But if he does come back, it's going to probably be pretty funny. There'll probably be a great reason. And I guess it's easier to know that he's out there and maybe happier helping out and building this new society from all of these kids who were really refugees of the High Evolutionary, who, we'll of course speak about in a moment. I think one of the characters who has had the most growth from when we first met her is Nebula. And she really started to, be seen differently. I would say the biggest difference was really Infinity War and into Endgame. I mean, that's when she started kind of being friends with our heroes instead of, really just trying to kill everyone, kill her sister and anybody who's standing in a, 20-mile radius of her sister if she needs to. So, and then I know it's in the trailer, but that moment when Gamora says, it sounds more like you're talking about her, and just sort of the way that Peter looks at her, it's still I've seen the movie twice now, and I'd seen that in the trailer, a dozen times. It's still very funny. I never realized how black your eyes were, and I think that even where she's at in the beginning of the film to the end of the film, I mean, Mantis points out she's always angry at everyone, and she's she smiles at the end. She dances a little bit, you know, and I think that it's a nice way. You can see that James Gunn really felt strongly about, I want to kind of have left my mark on these characters. I want to leave them in a good place. Somebody, you know, if Taika Waititi comes in and does a Guardians Volume 3, that's up to him to mess it up in any way he wants to. Whoever they might want to bring in. Yeah, I meant 4. Thank you, David. Yeah, Guardians.
Either
4.
way, don't do it.
Yeah, but yeah, the idea that, look, I would be surprised if there wasn't some follow up of Guardians in some way, but maybe they'll just pop up in, you know, Avengers films, and I think that would probably be fine with me too. But what's that?
They could just do an Adam Warlock film, and then he
that's true.
eventually break off from the Guardians. They do their own thing,
Yeah.
and then we actually get to see him become the superhero a lot of people wanted.
Right. I think so. I think that that is a character that we're probably be very likely to see a lot more of, and not necessarily in the context of the Guardians. But with Nebula, it's really such a complicated and just tragically sad character. You know, I mean, as she's watching the recording of the High Evolutionary basically engineering rockets, she's like, this is worse than anything that Thanos did to me, you know. And you know, Karen Gillan does a fantastic job as this character under so much prosthetics. I mean, she's this lovely, fresh-faced ginger lady from the UK. You know, she was beloved on Doctor Who, and then it's like, yeah, you're gonna have to shave your head and be blue for kind of a decade, which is insane. But I wanted to get your thoughts first, David, on the evolution of Nebula, you know, as we've known the character, but also really throughout the course of this film in particular.
I'm not sure if I liked her better hating her. Like, that's how good she is, where I enjoyed hating her, and now I enjoy liking her. And I don't know which character I like better. You know, I as a villain, as the lackey of Thanos, hating Gamora, I really enjoyed her. I thought she was, you know, clearly a tortured soul who didn't love her father, but she was trying to get his respect. And I thought she was a great foil for Gamora. And then that brief period where Gamora's cool and she's cool, that was fine. But this iteration of her, and all props to the actress who plays her, Karen, right?
Karen Gillan,
Karen Gillan, she's fantastic. I'm, by the way, if she does shave her head, her hair grows back incredibly fast, and I need to know what she's using. Because
and for our visual audience, I have an image of her. No, this is her first appearance on Doctor Who, so more than a decade ago. That's her real hair. Yeah. And but she has worn wigs in the time that she has done this character for sure. I just wanted to,
But no, I think she's great. I think, the thing about Rocket, like it was that moment where you go, okay, I have it bad, but he has it worse. And I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. It reminded me of it. It's nothing to do with Marvel, but I was a counselor at a camp, at Ronald McDonald House camp, with kids with cancer. And I also am a childhood survivor, but that's not really part of the story. That's why I volunteered. And I'm walking up the camp has a giant hill going to the lake. And I had twisted my ankle, and two people are like, you have your arms around two people. They carry you up the hill, right?
Yeah.
A girl who had lost her leg to cancer, one leg, goes hopping by me up the hill. And I realized, as bad as I have it right now, where I can't walk on my ankle, look what this girl is accomplishing. She's hopping up the hill past me. And I got that, I got that feeling for a minute, not to bring you guys down, but I got that feeling like, wow, okay, I've been living with this anger, this angst in my life, and the downtrodden feeling like, what I'm going through. And when you realize someone else has it worse and they're dealing and look what they've accomplished, that's what I felt like. I felt like she looked at him and was like, wow, he went through worse than I did. And yet look how he is, right? Look what a great, fun, person to be around, a raccoon to be around. And I think that was the turning point for her, because she said, you know what? I am angry. Mantis is right. I've lived with anger and all this pent up frustration. And this guy had it worse. Maybe it wasn't so. Maybe I can have a better outlook. And that's what I took from that, having a similar experience.
Yeah, and Ivan Soto kind of piggybacks on that, and he points out, Nebula's reaction to finding out that Rocket being okay is a very sweet moment, and I think it's also a very important character moment because nowhere near as serious, but she's so dismissive early on because Cosmo's like, "Did you hear that he called me a bad dog?" And she's just like, "I don't care." It's like I don't care about anybody else's pain, and that's only like an hour and a half earlier. So, but it's nice to see that yes, she cares about these characters. I was going to say these people, but again, he's a raccoon. So I agree. She was such a great character to hate, but I think that's what made her interesting. That she evolved in this way. What are your thoughts on Nebula, Jeff?
Yeah, I love Nebula in this volume. I thought she had a lot of growth, and I honestly felt like Gamora and Nebula kind of switch roles, especially in this volume, because Nebula became more of the friend of the group. She's obviously helping out. She was obviously strong and was a warrior type, but Gamora was the one that was not really there by not by I mean she wasn't there because she wanted to be there. She was there by force. So they kind of switched roles in that sense. And I really enjoyed her, and throughout the whole volume, I thought this movie she really grew the most. And then also you kind of mentioned it at the top. I enjoyed her so much in this movie because of how much I learned in Infinity Wars, because I got to see her background, because I got to see her struggle. I was like, okay, you see so much growth over these last couple movies. Now I'm happy that she's part of the crew and everything. And Gamora's character, it just the you saw all this growth in the first couple movies, and then just go straight back and get a refresh, and now it's a new character. And I like like David said earlier, you kind of play on the same jokes that you mentioned in the prior movies. There was no evolution, or not. I don't think evolution is the right word. There's no growth in that storyline either. So where I love Nebula's storyline and growth, Gamora's I do not.
Yeah, I think it's tough because that's an external set of circumstances. It's a story that James Gunn didn't tell that took Gamora off the table for him. So there's this other Gamora that you have who's not the same, and it is kind of interesting. And I think that it is nice that Peter mentions, well, you did always want a home. You're not at home with the Reavers. But then the last shot of her in the movie, she is at home with the Reavers. So it's like, even this Gamora, as Peter points out, even this version of you isn't all bad. Although it is nice that he calls her a dick earlier. I thought that's a good laugh right there. But ultimately, obviously, this is Rocket's movie. And the amount of time spent on his backstory, it might be one of the rare moments where you're like, okay, it might have lagged a little bit. I was very interested in it both times I saw it, but I think that that was something that my wife might have felt like there was a little bit more than needed to make a movie like closer to 2.5 hours when maybe it didn't need to be. But there's no denying just how well they have been able to make us care about these CGI characters, to make us care about a talking raccoon, to make us care about a tree who only says one sentence until the end, and you kind of look at some of the visuals of the Guardians, and there's so much of it where you're like, how were they able to take this idea, these characters that nobody really thinks about, and somehow make them this team, this group of characters that we all care about so much, that there's emotion about that, Rocket and his friends from Batch 89, Lila and Floor and Teefs, that we have all this stuff going on, and it's like it's a huge accomplishment to me anyway, to be able to pull that off and really make us care about everybody. So Rocket, in and of himself, as a character, I can't believe that they are able to get so much emotion behind his story, make us care about him so much. When we first meet him, it's Bradley Cooper doing a funny voice, but he's so much more than that. And just the tragic backstory, even like it's pointed out in the chat, and we said it a few moments ago, even Nebula's like, wow, he had it bad. Every part of my body has basically been, you know, replaced and refined by my abusive father. And this raccoon had it worse than I did. So I think that it's such a great story. I think that there is so much tragedy literally on the table if they risk everything to save him and then they're not able to save them, which is what it looks like was about to happen. But I think it's great that this character's still around. Clearly we'll see more of him. I mean, he's one of the CGI characters. He's the lead, he's the captain of the Guardians going forward. So we're going to see a lot more of him. And I don't know, I just feel like he is one of the most impressive things about this franchise, that they built up this character and we care about him in the way we do. What do you think about Rocket just sort of being the focus in this, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. I love Rocket Raccoon. You get to see his growth over to so many different movies. And for him to be the focal point in this, it was great to see you. And we saw him in so many different movies. We saw him lead, saw him be in different roles, but we still didn't know his backstory. And now he's officially Rocket Raccoon, which is just great to see. And to your earlier point, where James Gunn has put so many different creatures, animals, things in front of us, and we were just expected to imagine that they're real, whether it's a tree, whether it's a raccoon, whether it's a squirrel. We were literally watching a squirrel and a raccoon hug in an astral plane, like where they would think they're about to be dead. So that's the only part where I was like, wow, we're actually watching this and we have feelings about this. James Gunn is doing something right. So it was really cool to see. I mean, you cared about all the people in his storyline, in his backstory, and that's a credit to the director.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a visual audience, I'm sharing the common poster for Volume 3. And, in the front row, you do have an astronaut, cosmonaut dog. You have a tree. You have a raccoon. You have a green lady. You have a bald blue lady. You have a bug. You have a bug chick. You have all of these crazy things. And it's like, it's even more impressive than things that have gone before. The fact that Star Wars made you care about a walking carpet and a beeping ashtray, basically. So sort of the same point, David. Talk a little bit about Rocket, sort of what we get from him in this movie, but obviously how important everything leading up to this movie was for us to care about him in this way.
From the first movie, I fell in love with him. I thought his attitude when they were in prison, he's like, let's kick some ass. He didn't, I don't care. Let's just destroy people. I loved his attitude. Yeah. But this movie made me care about him, right? He wasn't just because he's a cartoon. He's like basically a cartoon, right? He's a cartoon stuck in a movie. You're like, wow, that's a fun character. That's a fun cartoon that they stick in. I know it's CGI, but you know what I'm saying. It's like Roger Rabbit, right? There's humans and his right. You're like, oh, he's fun. He's funny. But this movie, you started to believe he's a person or like a sentient being, not just a dumb raccoon that happens to be able to talk. He's actually brilliant. So brilliant that the High Evolutionary hated him for being that brilliant. And you see the torment and the explanation for why he's so gruff. And how long has it been? 9 years, 10 years, right? Since the first movie. And I remember seeing the trailer for Guardians and they're in the lineup, and like who, and he does the thing with the finger. Star-Lord does the rod and reel with the finger.
Middle finger. Yeah.
Right. And when I grew up, the Guardians of the Galaxy was other people, right? It was other characters. And so
I was talking earlier that when I was a comic book reader, an avid comic book reader in the early 90s, it was basically Sylvester Stallone's character, Starhawk, Yondu, Charlie X. It's a whole different group characters that sort of get cameos in this, but it's not any of these characters. As the Guardians.
Yeah. And so I'm like, there's a raccoon in the Guardians now. What? There's a tree. I was lost as someone who's a big Marvel fan. I was still a little lost because who would have thought they would make a movie about the Guardians of the Galaxy? They're such an afterthought in comic books. And so I'm like, all right, I'll do some research. I'll Google it, see, because I remember Starhawk and Yondu and all the originals. And
Yeah.
what's going on? And to take it now where I'm like, oh my God, please don't die, Raccoon. Please don't die. And when the scene when he's reaching into the cage and you see the little Rocket when he's in his eyes and are so big and he's scared. James Gunn, man, I love him. He made me like Suicide Squad. So
it's a great point. He made me like John Cena. So,
yes, Peacemaker's
I didn't know if
fantastic.
that was possible. And yeah, look, we'll have future conversations about all of this. I do want to touch on a couple more things before.
I want to get to Groot if you don't mind.
Yeah, I want to talk about Groot as well. But I do want to touch for a moment on the fact that, I referenced it, Rocket, this CGI character. And in the chat, people are pointing out that Lila's an otter. So thank you. And voiced by Linda Cardellini, who is also Hawkeye's wife in the MCU. She plays Hawkeye's wife. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, because I didn't pick up on it the first time I saw the movie. And I had to I read the credits. I'm like, okay, who is she? So we have these characters. We have Teefs, we have Lila, and we have Floor. And they're such whacked out crazy characters, but it's like we care about them as well. But to David's point, we also care about Groot. We care about the talking tree who only says I am Groot. So please, David, give us your thoughts on Groot.
Well, I wanted to start a controversy here. There's a lot of people debating when he says I love you guys, because if you remember when he walks up behind Gamora at the end of the movie, he says, I am Groot. And she says, yeah, it was a pleasure working with you too, or something. Where they seemed to understand what he was saying. And so the question is, that seems to be going around the internet. Did he learn how to say, I love you guys? Or did we learn how to understand Groot? That's what we heard. The same way being around him gives you the language.
Because my wife was surprised that they didn't react to it. And my thought was, which I hadn't thought about it until she pointed it out.
Look at Jeff.
Yeah. Jeff's mind is blown. For those of you that are just listening, you're just, you can hear the explosion. If I was smart, I would add an explosion in post. But the idea that they don't react to it, I'm like, well, because they're used to hearing him talk. So if he did speak, it wouldn't seem any different to them. And that might just be for us. But also, he may not have actually said that. That is the mind-blowing thing. So thank you for that, David Brody, because that's something I'm probably going to ask everyone that I talk to about the movie now. So David has planted the seed, and I will try to have a tally at the end of this collection of conversation to see what people think, because you've convinced me now that he actually only said I am Groot, but we're part of the family now, so we understand it.
And the fact that no one reacted, that you pointed out, is what really puts me over the top. They didn't react. They didn't go, oh my God, he speaks English.
Yeah.
So Jeff, if you can get the brain pieces, if you can stuff your medulla oblongata back into your ear and process this, which one do you think it is now? Do you think that he didn't actually say that and we were just able to hear it the way they do? Or do you think that they didn't notice because they're so used to understanding him?
I'm so glad it was Vin Diesel, because we're all part of the family now. Just like Fast and the Furious, it's all about
family.
It's all about the family, and we're part of the family now, because I for sure thought he just knew it. He just learned English. I was like, oh, look at Groot learning English. But when you said that no one responds, it's a wrap. To your point, I'm also going to ask my friend that I'm watching the movie with tomorrow. The first thing I'm going to say is, so do you think Groot spoke English, or do we speak Groot? Because I'm going with we spoke Groot, and that just makes me even more excited to see it. And it was funny though, because when he was saying I am Groot, I was starting to understand what he meant because of how other people reacted. So you kind of just put context clues into it. And then now it's like, you know exactly what he's going to say, because if we do see him again, hopefully we'll be still speaking Groot.
Right. And Daniel Drew seems to agree with this. And Daniel Drew seems to be my authority on so many things, but he thinks being around Groot and being someone he trusts has finally made us, the audience, able to understand him. So now the audience is indeed family as we'll see in Fast X in a few short weeks. It is indeed all about
Already-
family with the Guardians as well.
I got my ticket.
There's a lot of other ground to cover in future conversations. I do want to give each of you a chance to comment on an actor who I'm always very hesitant to say his name. He was also great in Peacemaker. I believe it's Chukwudi Iwuji, and if it's not, my apologies, but he played the High Evolutionary, who it's very tough to be that kind of unhinged, maniacal, unreasonable character who freaks out. But I think he played it really well. And I was kind of watching it for the second time with that in mind. What did you think of the High Evolutionary, Jeff?
I thought his role was great. I thought he played it perfectly. How crazy he was, how not crazy crazy as in villainous, but also crazy as in sporadic, crazy as in if you don't see my way, I'm just gonna kill you and just be it's one track mind in that sense. Even though I said sporadic earlier, you kind of get what I meant.
Sure, absolutely.
He's he played that role very well, and I was excited to see him once I saw Peacemaker as well. But it's funny because when I saw him in Comic-Con and he did that whole spiel walking around doing the whole monologue and stuff, it was very quiet. A lot of people were like, what's going on? They didn't really see the concept that what eventually came the High Evolutionary in the film. And when I tell you that face makeup to make his face peeled off, that was great. It was great CGI, visual effects, because
Yeah,
I loved it. I thought he played it well, and I thought it visually looked great.
yeah. Same question for you, David. The High Evolutionary in this film.
When he's crawling around the cells on his hands and knees,
Yeah,
you got such an impression of what kind of disturbed, twisted man he is. And I tell you, at one point in the movie, I thought to myself, I like him better than Kang. I thought he was a much better villain than Kang was. I loved He Who Remains, unrelated.
sure.
I thought, Kang was sort of, I'm a bad guy, but I'm better than those guys. And you don't know how bad those guys are. And you didn't really know, was he evil? I'm not sure if he's evil. He's bad, but is he still pretty good? This guy's evil. This guy is just a mental case. And there was no ambiguity there. He's a twisted, Nazi kind of a leader where he's looking for the master race. And I enjoyed that character better than Kang in the Ant-Man movie. I thought he was fantastic.
And I mean, he's a character who we see, he feels like the Counter Earth hasn't gone the way he wanted to, so he's just going to blow it up. And it's almost like Star-Lord pointing out that he saw the drug deal happen. He's like, yeah, I know. That's why I got to get rid of it. It's like he was planning on it, but he's like, you know what? I got to do it right now, actually. It's like, if this idiot can notice how bad this is, I'm going to have to do away with it. I want to make sure to give the two of you a chance to touch on a few different aspects of the film. In a future part of this conversation, we're going to spend some more time on the music, but I wanted to ask you each individually first if there's any inclusion of a piece of music maybe you didn't know coming in, were surprised by, or maybe you even knew from the trailer. It's a lot of late era stuff, David. So there may have even been some songs that you remember for the many years you worked at Z100 in New York. There might have been some of those songs that you're like, oh yeah, this was in rotation. What are some of the things that stood out for you, or if there's just one in particular that really stands out for our audience?
I knew every song, so it was not about having worked in radio. But as I was pointing to the logo of my Brooklyn Boys podcast, you may or may not know I'm a Brooklyn native. Yes. And so legally, I have to like the Beastie Boys. And so when No Sleep Till Brooklyn was the song in the really great hallway scene, that was a win-win for me because I was in the recliner chair with my feet tapping, and I was trying not to do the rap part along with the group. And, so for me, that was great. I love James Gunn's music. I love what he did in Peacemaker. Agreed. I love his song choices. So for me, No Sleep Till Brooklyn stood out, but the whole soundtrack is great. I couldn't help but humming along in the theater, but making sure the guy next to me didn't hear me doing it. So no, I
Yeah.
loved it all, but that was my favorite. That scene.
But you
That
never
was-
know. He could have been the lead singer of Space Hog, and he would have appreciated it. He's like, "Thank you, thanks for knowing our song."
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but what about you, Jeff? In terms of if there's one that comes out, you don't have to keep yourself limited to one. But in terms of the musical selection, was there something that just really jumped out at you?
So it's not gonna lie, it's been a couple days since we watched it.
Yeah.
Like almost a little over a week. So I can't remember exactly which songs.
Oh,
But I
admit
remember
it.
thoroughly liking the soundtrack. Like from the
It
from the
fits,
jump.
yeah.
From
Yeah.
the beginning of the movie, like you knew he put his stamp on it in every different situation. Once Peter Quill or Rocket started playing it, it set the mood for the whole scene. So I enjoyed it. A lot of them, I try to pull up the soundtrack track list, but a lot of them are kind of music I haven't listened to.
A lot of them are songs
love
you
Lana
need
Del
to
Rey.
you need to get like the Amazon or iTunes like sample of 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, of course I know that song, because a lot of them don't stand out by the title. I do agree with David about No Sleep Till Brooklyn. That is a scene that probably I should have been annoyed by, because he's got the one like earbud dangling out of his ear, but he always had the headphones, you know, when he still had the Walkman. So I'm like, it's consistent. It should bother me, but it worked so well. It's got such great riffs. For me, and I expect that I'll repeat this in future parts of the conversation. I am a huge fan of Alice Cooper. That is the first concert I ever saw in 1990. There is a song from him, which it's like a traditional old song, Always Chasing Rainbows, from his 1976 album, Go to Hell. It is a deep cut of the deepest order. I mean, it's an album track. It wasn't even a B-side for a single. When that comes on, I have a friend who, when he went to go see it, he told me he was like, he wanted to like stand up and raise his fist in the movie theater. He was so excited to hear that song, because it's just so rare. It fits really well. It's nice that Gamora kind of turns it up. It's that song when, you know, she's there on the ship by herself, and she's like, okay, maybe this music that's pumped through the ship all the time isn't all bad. And so that just sort of blew my mind. But obviously, it's the main song in the trailers. It's the first one we get, that Rainbow, Since You've Been Gone. It's just, you know, he always seems to have those songs that you're like, oh yeah, I've heard that at some point, but you don't think of, you know, whereas Thor Love and Thunder has some of the laziest music selection that I had ever heard in my life. So many Guns N' Roses songs, the most common Guns N' Roses songs. James Gunn, it's the opposite of that. Before we say goodbye for this chapter of our chat, is there anything else that comes to mind? I'll ask you first, David. Anything else that you want to chime in on?
Yeah,
about
I got
Guardians
two
3?
quick things.
Yeah,
When he
absolutely.
went back for the Zune,
Yeah.
it reminded me of the scene in Indiana Jones' Last Crusade when the guy goes back for the chalice, for the Holy Grail,
Yeah,
and that's what kills him, right? And then he tells when was it he tells Indy, let it go, like let the cup
Yeah.
go. Like he went
Right.
back for that. It seemed like a trope to me that he was going to die over the Zune, but that's
Yeah.
what it reminded me of. That going back for that, if you didn't go back, he would have lived, which is really why I thought they were going to kill him. I thought the Zune is the way to go. Die like the Zune did. A horrible death.
I mean, that basically was his Holy Grail, not literally the Zune,
Yeah.
but the music was the Holy Grail for Peter. So it would have been fitting, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the other thing is, I don't know if you noticed in the first of the two relatively disappointing bonus scenes.
Yeah.
Well, the second one, did you catch the Kevin Bacon joke?
Oh yeah, the newspaper that his
Right,
Peter's
Kevin Bacon.
grandfather's holding. Yeah, he talks about being abducted by aliens. Yes.
That was funny.
Yeah. I
In the
thought that was
first one, when they show the new Guardians, the
Yeah.
little girl who was she was the one running in a circle around the track.
And Ivan Soto has had.
That's what I was going to say. Phyla-Vell. Right.
Yeah.
So Phyla-Vell in the comics becomes Quasar. She's the second Quasar, but I guess in Marvel, she'll be the first Quasar. And then
Yeah.
at some point in the comics, she also becomes Captain Marvel. So I wouldn't be
interesting.
surprised if somehow she ends up in the Marvels as well. Maybe there's a
That would-
crossover, a cameo of
That
some
would make
kind.
a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah,
So-
that was a character that I wasn't familiar with, but looked into after the fact, and I think it's a nice inclusion. And Also, interesting that, their conversation on music, she's highlighting Britney Spears and Korn because, we see Rocket physically switch to the 2000s. So it's like, that's probably all she hears, around nowhere at that point. So, yeah. And, we talked a little bit about it. I think just getting to see the Guardians going forward, good to know. Whether there's a Guardians 4 or not, I am 100% sure we'll see those characters again as they exist there, but maybe also some of the ones we said goodbye to. And yes,
And then last thing, Jeff, I'm sorry to cut you off. Last thing was when he's talking about the neighbor's kid, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, the 40-year-old kid can't mow the lawn." That's not a throwaway. That's not a throwaway. Somebody's living next door that's going to play an important role. I have to believe.
Yeah.
that,
Okay. I thought you were going to tell me who you thought it was. And I was like, yeah,
Well-
I had that thought too, but I was like, there's just something I don't know.
Well, some of the theories I've seen, because I follow a lot of YouTubers, New Rock Stars and Screen Crush. The theory is that either the grandfather had another kid, or that Ego may have had another kid. But in the comics,
Yeah.
there's he's got another sibling from his mother's side, I guess, or a cousin, and who becomes a superhero. So I forget who it was, but that they think that's who they're referencing is another relative of his that's going to be a hero, because they wouldn't have mentioned the neighbor's
No, they wouldn't
adult
have.
child for no reason. But
and
who it
it's
could be, I
very
don't know.
distracting, the product placement for Magic Spoon, a brand of cereal that
Oh.
people mostly just know from podcasts.
Yes,
And it's like
Terrible.
$7.50 a box.
Terrible.
I like a couple of the flavors, but only
Really?
because I would get 4 of them sent to me regularly when they were advertisers on the Dennis Miller option. Jeff, I want to give you the last word before we share our clips and say goodbye. Is there anything, just overall feelings, anything that you didn't get a chance to touch on, or just how you're feeling about the Guardians a week out from seeing it? And it sounds like you're about to go see it again.
Yeah, one thing that I don't think we touched on enough is Cosmo, and I loved that addition to the film. Even in the little parts that he was in it, I felt like it was great. You got to see his power and the comedy of him wanting to be him or her, because I couldn't tell. Just
right, it's a female voice,
Yeah.
but I think it's the
I'll go
dog
with
may be female. And Maria Bakalova, who people who saw the second Borat, which was only on Amazon Prime, she's so funny in that, and she's very talented. Yeah, obviously just voice acting here, but also really well done. And Ivan Soto feels very strongly that Cosmo's a girl, which sounds about right. But the voice could have just been female. But yeah, I think that the Cosmo is a very nice touch, a nice addition, and fits in really well with this wacky cast of characters. And look, I'm glad that we add in characters like this, and we got to see Howard the Duck yet again, once again voiced by Seth Green. Toying with us that maybe one day we'll get some more Howard the Duck. But that's all the time for this part of our conversation. We'll be back with more Guardians talk in the days ahead. But you'll have to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. I'll be sure to let you know when we're going to have more of these conversations. We're working around a number of schedules, but I'm excited to continue talking about the movie. And if people want to continue talking to David Brody and hearing what he's up to, where do they go to do that?
You could find me at David Brody on Twitter and Instagram. I'm on Twitter, no longer with a blue check mark, but Instagram, I still have one. So there you go.
Well, then that's the one that matters. And if people want to hear you, Brooklyn Boys, I assume, can be found everywhere podcasts are found, right?
Everywhere podcasts are found. But if you listen on the iHeartRadio app, there's a little microphone button and you can talk back and leave us a message. So I'll recommend that way.
That's all the reason right there to do that.
There you go. And it's
if people want to see videos of Jeff looking at real estate that he can't afford in and around Los Angeles, where might they go to look for that?
You can follow just right here at Jeff Will Jr. on all social media platforms. I was never cool enough to have a check mark. Still don't, but still follow me anyways.
Follow him anyway. Absolutely. And, I know that for your day job, you, like I, are probably very excited about the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, which will be out in June. I don't know if you'll be allowed to talk about it, but I'm going to be excited to talk about it. And hopefully hopefully you're able to join us. But it's all right if you're not allowed to talk about it. It's not going to be a problem.
I can say that it's a great movie. You guys should be very excited. There's a lot of dope characters
Nice.
and cameos.
Wait,
and stuff going on.
can we talk
So-
about why he can't talk about it?
He
Oh,
works
I
for
work
Sony.
I work in marketing for Sony Pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I work full time. I'm working at Sony, and I'm working on the home entertainment side of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So I'm not gonna confirm or deny if I've seen the movie or when
Sure.
I've seen the movie recently. But I can confirm that it's a great movie and that people have a lot to be excited for.
I think that's all that everybody wants to hear. I mean, maybe people want to know more, but I think that that's exciting to hear on the heels of a Guardians movie that I think is being very well received. The fact that, we're about to get more Spidey, and that's going to be well received. Lots to be excited about. Secret Invasion's coming. This show will be back with somewhat more regularity. It's really been a dry spell since Ant-Man, but the Marvel machine is starting to gear up. So please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. And of course, the Blackcast exists as an audio podcast, which can be found wherever you find podcasts. But you can also find our shows on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe wherever you like, but please join us for our next conversation, more Guardians. And as always, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. That is where I will keep you posted on more of this conversation. But that is all the time we have for now. We'll see you next time. And as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!
Excelsior!